What is up, YouTube? So today, by popular demand, a lot of people have been asking for this, and this is my guide on a 5-way build. Now, a lot of people believe that 5-way builds have been kept in secret as some sort of long-lost art in order to gatekeep people away from doing this. Oh no, someone died in my 5-way carry. Well, if it's not me dying in my highlight video, it's someone else dying in the highlight video. But as you can see, this playstyle is pretty mind-numbingly boring. I did do this for roughly 2 to 3 days at the start of the league, and I did find a decent build. I tried to look at PoE ninjas for some inspiration, and I do think that this build will serve your purpose if your purpose is to make as much currency as possible in the most boring way possible. But some people don't really mind this. Like, if you just consider it as an aesthetic experience and kind of like ASMR, this can be kind of fun in a weird way, especially if you do this like 2 to 3 hours a day, and then you move on to some other methods of currency generation. But let's get straight into it. Let's see what exactly a 5-way build actually is. And in this video, you will see this is Kinetic Blast, and I'm pretty much able to kill everything right away. And this is my character right here. Every plate Kobe, so it can, as you can see, it has very low armor, very low evasion, and almost no defensive stats at all. Yet it's able to carry a full 6-man party and be able to generate insane amounts of currency. And like I say, this build does unlock the best money-making method in the game, and that is 5-way carries. And the new update to Divine Orbs has drastically changed the profit margin for this build, because you can finally find timeless jewels that will be extremely valuable. Right now, there is a tool called a timeless jewel calculator that you can use in order to find the timeless jewels. So as I've shown you in previous videos, this calculator is a complete game changer. You can pretty much look up a jewel, the exact jewel you want. So in this search right here, and I am leaking my private searches, so this is a double rarity jewel, and you can pretty much type in all the numbers. And you can see here, if you hit one of these jewels, you will get a lottery payout that could be 50, 80 divines in value. And these jewels absolutely do sell. I've sold multiple jewels already for 20, 30, 40 divines when I used to do this method. And even though a lot of people feel like there's some secrecy shrouded around this build's main gatekeeper is the fact you have to use a headhunter. But I do think that there could be a budget option with Inspired Learning 3 times and Solstice Vigil, which might be able to make it work. Now, for this build, we will be using a Deadeye. Deadeye is definitely the best ascendancy overall, and that's pretty much you want to scale your projectiles as much as possible. So as you can see here, I actually had 2 level 100 characters, and this is my 5-way character that I was using before. And if we look at the Deadeye, you have Gathering Winds, which gives you Tailwind. And this is pretty important since we're not able to use Tailwind boots. We can get Skill Chain +1 times and Chain when colliding with terrain. So the 5-way has a lot of walls. So every single time your projectiles hit the wall, it has a 30% of chaining again. And we have 2 additional projectiles. And then we have Far Shot, which means that we can stand in one spot and pretty much be like a machine gun turret. So we do have to use a Forbidden Jewel in order to get all of these points. Otherwise, we will be short on points. Now, let's see here. Kinetic Blast is a skill of choice. A lot of people wonder, why don't you play Tornado Shot? Tornado Shot is just not as good as Kinetic Blast. It doesn't scale with area. It doesn't allow you to overlap your damage. And area is extremely important. This build does use Explode Chests, and it does use Herald of Ash. So area damage means that you can overlap the damage. And as soon as one mob dies, you can pretty much guarantee that the whole screen will die. And once you get enough damage, you can pretty much one-shot the boss with pretty much just your Herald explosions. Now, a question I do get a lot is, can you be physical or do you have to be elemental? Now, there is no real answer to this. You can be either. Either one is fine. I do think that physical one has a higher top end, purely because of the headhunter buffs. As you may see from the Arch Nemesis buffs, if you ever looked at it, there are a bunch of Arch Nemesis buff that gives you Physics extra. And physical as extra actually does nothing when you're elemental build. But if you're a physical build, you have all of this base physical damage to scale it. So that's why we do decide to go physical as the main option. Now, you can decide to go elemental. I do think that elemental has a higher damage output or damage floor if you don't have really good gear. and it is a lot cheaper to craft an elemental wand rather than crafting a physical wand. Now, this build I do think is near unplayable without Headhunter. You could theoretically use Solstice Vigil and 3 Inspired Learnings. You could use an Inspired Learning here, and then you could use Inspired Learning over here, and then you could probably fit in an Inspired Learning over here. However, you will see that actually makes the build extremely point starved. Now, in terms of what Solstice Vigil actually does, is that Solstice Vigil makes it so you have Shaper's Presence, so the bus will last a little bit longer. So instead of 20 seconds, it will probably last around, I don't remember, like 30 seconds or so. Now, the main problem with this thing, actually, I'm not really sure how long it lasts. Let's go check it out so we can make sure. So it's Solstice Vigil, Path of Exile, right? So what you get is you actually get Shaper's Presence. So Shaper's Presence makes it so nearby allies has 20% slower expiration rate. So it does matter a little bit, and it does help out. But in the end, you probably don't want to not be using Headhunter because your clients are paying for a service, and it's going to be very, very noticeable when they put on an incubator and see that you're not really killing that many mobs. But you could try to choose it, and you could try to lower your fee, and I'm sure you will still be able to get some users. So next up, we have the tree, and exactly how we actually do the tree is we want to focus on large cluster jewels. Now, there are a lot of different variants that people do use, but I did this variant because it was the one that was the best for me, and I do think that is the one that it grants the most kills. Now, as you can see here, this is a 3 large cluster jewel tree. We have 1 large cluster here with this one, and then this one over here, and then another one over here. Now, I think this is an old tree that I was using because the new tree that I was using should have the explode cluster, because I do think explode cluster is the best. So where's my character? So we have to go to Calandra League, and right here, and we can see what I was doing on day 6. So pretty much I was using these clusters. There's Devastator, Feat to Fury, Martial Prowess, Devastator, Field of Fight, Smite the Weak, and Martial Prowess, Opportunistic Fusillade, and Storm's Hand. So the reason we want to use these Devastator clusters is because they actually grant an explode chance, and with this explode chance, we have almost 100% explode. So we have, right here, Devastator. Enemies killed with attacks have a 15% chance to explode, dealing 1/10 of their life as physical damage. Now, the difference between this explode and the explode chest is I don't think this actually chains because you have to get killed with attack hits. So you can't like chain it with Devastator. But you can see right here, we have another 15% one. So this does help out to clear quite a bit. Now for the medium clusters, and this is where the magic happens, is we go with this one called Assert Dominance and Vast Power. And what this means is that we can scale the area of our explosions. So if you can see the explosions, these actually matter a lot in terms of scaling the area. Now we have 20% increased area of area damage and 3% area of effect per power charge. But Assert Dominance is the main one. 25% increased area of effect if you kill 5 enemies recently. So we go right here, number of enemies killed recently, and this actually increases the amount of area that we do get. So right here, we have Empowered Envoy, and this is pretty much just for the heralds. It doesn't really matter too much. But over here, we have Assert Dominance and Magnifier again, Assert Dominance and Magnifier. So this does help us get a lot of area on our explosions, and this is what causes it to have these huge full screen clears. Now for the Forbidden Jewels, you want to be using Ricochet, or you could get Endless Munitions, or you can get Far Shot, or you can get Gathering Winds. It's really whatever you want. And Focal Point. So you pretty much just choose whatever is the cheapest. I think in my case, it was Ricochet that was the cheapest. Now Watcher's Eye, you kind of want a Hatred conversion, so you can convert your physical damage to cold damage. If you look at this tree, for the physical variant, you have to convert your physical to elemental damage. So we have 40% physical converted to cold, and you can use the Hatred Watcher's Eye to get another 40%. So I do think I didn't use a conversion one. So my Watcher's Eye was actually Hatred Crit at this time, but you should use Hatred Cold conversion. And I was using 25% converted to Lightning on Storm's Hand. Now, even if you don't have it fully converted, it shouldn't really matter too much, because Headhunter buffs actually convert your physical damage to elemental damage. So as soon as you get a few Headhunter buffs, you should be fully converted to elemental damage from your physical damage. So don't worry about it too much. Now, Mantra of Flames is pretty much used for flat damage from all of the buffs that we will be getting. And we do want to use 1 Corrupted Blood Jewel. because if we get corrupted blood on ourselves, we will die. So just choose any type of rare jewel that will give you CB immunity. So I choose one of these ones right here. So it has corrupted blood, strengthened in attack speed of wands, and attack and cast speed. So you can get it on Abyss Jewel, you can get it on a regular jewel. Just make sure you have corrupted blood. And next up, we have Intuitive Leap. You can choose to use Intuitive Leap, or you can choose to use the Lethal Pride or Brutal Restraint. Lethal Pride is probably the best if you want to min-max it for damage. You can get like 15-20% damage. You can get Intimidate, and you can also get percent strength. So if I was going to min-max the build, I would probably choose a Lethal Pride instead of Intuitive Leap. Now, we do want to scale projectile speed. That's why I took Long Shot. And then this one gives more projectile speed. So this allows you to stand in the same place and be able to hit more of the screen. Now, we do take this cluster here for Omni. It gives us some attributes. Over here is mandatory because we're actually trying to convert our physical damage to cold damage. And right here is really, really important. What this does is it creates more projectiles when you use Fork. As you can see here, for our Kinetic Blast, we're actually using Awakened Fork. So we want to generate more projectiles, which creates more overlapping explosions. And over here, 13%, 15% chaining range. And as you can see here, the whole tree pretty much revolves around generating as many projectiles as possible, making the projectiles as large as possible, and shooting the projectiles as far as possible and chaining it as far as possible. And that's how we're able to get the full screen clear while pretty much standing in the same spot. Now, you do want to try to maybe get a little bit of base life, so around like 1.7 to 2k life. It really depends on what you're comfortable with, but pretty much as soon as you get the headhunter buffs, your character should be pretty much immortal. Now, in terms of reservation efficiency, it depends on how many auras you're going to run. I only had to use one of these auras thing, and you can also take some heralds. Now, these herald nodes are relatively important because Herald of Ash is actually a huge source of your clear. As you can see here, we're running Herald of Ash, and I have Herald of Ice, Herald of Purity, and Hatred, so they're all damage auras. And you can pretty much play around with what auras you want to run, but we're not running any defensive auras at all, as we're going to be relying on our headhunter buffs to get everything in terms of defenses sorted out. So that's why I actually decided to run this. Without this reservation efficiency node, I think I didn't quite have enough mana to spam Kinetic Blast. And something else that people obviously wonder about is how do you actually generate your mana? And as you can see here, you need one with Fuel to Fight, I think. So we have right here, Fuel to Fight. You can get attack damage, leech this mana. If you don't have that, you have to take this node right here with Mana Leech, or you can take the nodes over here for Clever Thief. So if you have Fuel to Fight, then you should be fine, but it really depends on what your setup is. But as you can see here, the tree has a lot of flexibility in terms of what you want to use for your clusters, what you want to use for your medium clusters. And I know a lot of people actually do decide to use pressure points and quick getaway, which does prioritize a little bit of movement speed, but it really depends on how you actually want to play it. And of course, you want to make sure you have these wand clusters or this wand mastery that fires an additional projectile. This wand mastery or cluster over here is extremely, extremely overpowered in terms of what it gives for damage. As you can see, that each node is an insane amount of damage increase. But anyhow, I hope that explains the tree pretty well, and it shows you the rationale behind taking each of these points. Now, next up, we can go over to gear. So Omniscience, I do think is the best option. It does give you the most damage, but you can also choose to use a Solstice Vigil if you want to go for a more budget setup. And Solstice Vigil is kind of nice because it does help you get a higher buff up time, so you can be at 40 stacks of headhunter buffs for a little bit longer. Now, as I said in the past, both physical or elemental wand works, and I do think the easiest way to craft a wand is getting a fracture attack speed wand. But at this point, you can pretty much buy a wand from the market because I do think a lot of these wands have been crafted in the past. Now, Shadows and Dust is being used for Rampage. As you can see here, you create a smoke cloud on Rampage, and it has the Rampage tag, which means that every single time you kill a mob, you gain a Rampage stack. And what Rampage stack does is it gives you some physical damage reduction, it gives you more move speed, and it gives you more attack speed. Now, Kinetic Blast does benefit a lot from Pierce, and we are using Replica Voidwalkers, and Replica Voidwalkers does give you additional chain +1 times, and it also gives you phasing if you killed recently. But we are getting our Pierce. I forgot where we're getting our Pierce from. I think we get our Pierce from Oh yeah, we get our Pierce from no. Oh, it's because we're doing Fork instead of Pierce. So Divergent Kinetic Blast is actually being used because we gain increased area of effect after forking, and we do have Awakened Fork. So instead of piercing, we're pretty much forking now. So let's see here. Replica Voidwalker gives us additional chain. So we have one chain from our Ascendancy and then another chain over here. And it also gives us phasing. So next up, we are using Black Sun Crest. I do think Black Sun Crest is the best damage helmet. So you can see Black Sun Crest allows you to get a bunch of Omni. Without the Black Sun Crest, we lose 470 Omni. And the Black Sun Crest should be enchanted with Kinetic Blast, has a 75% chance for an additional explosion, which actually helps out the clear a lot. Now, since we are using Omni, we want to get 2 rings with attributes. So these rings have T1, T1, T1 attributes, and you want to get life and some cold damage or flat damage. And elemental damage with attacks is another good mod. And as you can see here, I actually decided to go with a ring with some accuracy. Now, accuracy is super important because we want to make sure we have a 100% hit chance so that we can get the headhunter buffs as soon as possible. And for this ring, you can see we got life and then an elemental damage with attack skills roll. Now, Eshe's Mirror is mandatory, and the reason we want to use this is because it grants us flat damage, which is 1 to 2 lightning damage for each shocked enemy we've killed recently. And we are going to be killing a lot of enemies, like 300 to 400 enemies. And you can see here, once you enter into the config, 400 enemies will add a lot of damage in terms of the projectiles, or it won't. Or it caps out. I don't even know. Maybe it caps out. But all I know is that Eshe's Mirror is pretty much mandatory for this build. And it does give you shock reflection. Now, the chest piece, you have 2 different options. Personally, I like the explode chest a lot more. I do go for the elevated explode chest because it actually has an increased area of effect roll on it. But the explode chest is an option. But you can also use a grasping mail with attack speed with the lightning damage if you shocked recently mod. So it's pretty much the exact same mod as Eshe's Mirror, except it's 1 to 5 lightning damage instead of 1 to 10. And this should help your damage out a lot. Now, overall, you can see the gear is not really super expensive, besides maybe the wand and the explode chest maybe, and Omni. But the big thing is Headhunter is a huge problem in terms that it costs a lot. So in order to play this build, you have to use the Headhunter unless you want to undercharge for your carries and offer a slightly worse service, which is definitely doable. But in the end, I do think Explode Chest should be the best, and Eshe's Mirror is an MVP item in terms of what amount of damage it actually provides. Now, you might be wondering what is the playstyle of the build, because how do you actually survive and do the 5 ways when you only have 2k life? So this is me pretty much doing the 5 ways on the exact same character. And you can see here, you're very squishy at the start. You put a portal in the side so you don't actually click on it. I have accidentally clicked on it and bricked many runs in the past. So now you wait for everyone to gather up in a spot. And the way I was doing it here is I'm actually running around in a circle. So I wait for everyone to come together and then I start it. You make sure you have your golem out. And now once it starts, you can see we instantly get 20 headhunter buffs, right? At this point, we have 2.7k life. And the headhunter buffs actually give you a decent amount of survivability. But now you pretty much just run around in a circle, kill as many mobs as you want. Now, there is an important distinction about whether you want to go for boss kills or you want to go for XP. Now, if you want to go for XP, you don't really want to focus on a boss. You pretty much will just kill the boss with explosions as the time goes on. So you can see that boss right there pretty much just died. And then you just keep running around in circles over and over again. And it is pretty mind-numbingly boring, but you see there's really nothing to it. There's no like great skill. And there is another method that you can do that is even crazier that I'll show you. So you can either choose to stand still and shoot in a circle. So this is the other method that you might see what you do by 5-way carries nowadays. And it does mean you get a lot more mobs killed, but you get less boss kills. And it's very important you have projectile speed for this method. And it's also extremely important you have an aura bot, because that allows you to pretty much stand still and never have to worry about what's going on. So as you can see here, and this is me leaving, and you can see here, right now we are at the bottom of the map. And this is, the guy is pretty much just using either a script or he's actually there, just shooting it in a circle over and over again. And someone actually died in the group, but he doesn't need to move at all. an aura person is just resetting back and forth, but he's still in range of the auras. Now, with this method, it's a little bit harder to kill all the bosses immediately. You can see the boss right here is still alive, but this does allow you to get the most mobs killed, and it is pretty effortless. I think most of the times I tested it with an incubator. When buying these 5-way carries, it was around like 10k or maybe even 11k, but this is a very, very easy method you can do. You can pretty much put something on the other monitor and pretty much spin your screen and watch a TV show while you're doing this. And this is the maximum laziness route. So in terms of playstyle, it's really whatever you want to do. You could try to run in a circle if you feel like that's more fun, or you can stand in the same spot and just watch a TV show or something. Now, overall, I hope this has given you some insight on how you can start your own 5-way character. This is the unbeatable money-making method, but the groups might take a little bit longer to fill now, purely because there are less people playing the game. So you can see here, there's pretty much a person advertising it every minute, and it does take a little bit to fill the group. Now, how can you actually fill the group faster? There are a couple of ways of doing it. You can slightly undercut, and that actually does make a big difference. Most people don't really care about who's actually doing the runs as much. They care more about how much they actually pay. So if you actually slightly undercut, then you'll be able to fill your groups a lot faster. Now, another part of this is that a lot of your time is spent with downtime, and the profit margins are so great right now, you can afford to slightly undercut and still make a killing. Another tip you could do is you could try to sell bigger groups or bigger sets of runs. So you see how these people do 5 runs, some people do 4 runs. If you're able to do 10 runs at a time, that actually drastically cuts down on your time loss. So this person's selling 10 runs for 6 divines. So if you want to do it like that, that should help you lower your downtime. Now, as I say, most people usually charge 1 divine for 2 runs, and this does make a lot of currency. You could also make sure to level up gems in your offhand. So what I was doing in the past was that I actually had a full set of gems to level up. So you can see here I even have some. And I should probably corrupt this in power, right? What do you think I'm going to get? Level 4, right? Level 4, and bam. Level 3. Whatever. It's okay, but the 5-way builds do have a lot of different variants, but in the end, it's your explode, your heralds, and your headhunter buffs that carry everything. So you shouldn't really worry too much about the intricacies and just go with this base template. But thanks for watching, everyone. I hope you find more mirrors, exalted orbs, and mage bloods and divines than me. And see you next time. Bye.